Hello there and welcome to Black Jacko Gaming. Today we're going to take a look at the enhancements in the Space Marine Codex. I'm going to rank them based on how useful they are. So first up we've got the Gladius Task Force, and the first option we have is Artificer Armor. Now this grants the model 2+ save and gives them a feel no pain 5+. So this is quite nice to have if you've got a lone operative model perhaps, or it is a model that is going to be bopping around on their own and isn't really in a unit, or if it's in a unit that is going to be heavily targeted and might be taken out earlier on. So at 15 points, it's not too bad. It's quite a solid option, especially if you've got some points left over. Next, we've got Honor Firmament. This is 15 points, and this grants +1 attacks and strength to the bearer's melee weapon. And if you're in the Assault Doctrine, it grants +2 to both the attack and strength. So this is quite nice as well. Another solid option. If you got a melee type of character to get that +1 attack and strength is really nice. And then that once a game, perhaps twice a game with a stratagem, get that +2. It's a solid option, especially coming in at 15 points. But Adept of Codex next. Now this is for a captain model only, and this allows you to select the tactical doctrine in the command phase for the bearer's unit. And you can do this even if it's already been used in the game. You can use this on top of the doctrine that's already in place, so this will only affect the unit that the model is leading. Now, 20 points, it's a bit on the pricey side. There's not really many situations where you're going to put yourself back into the tactical doctrine for the units that you're going to be supporting. So it's perhaps slightly disappointing. The main benefit of tactical doctrine is that you can fall back and still shoot, so it's going to be very much situational, and you won't use this all the time. And at 20 points, it's a little bit on the pricey side, so C tier is where it belongs. Then we've got Fire Discipline. Now this is 30 points. It's a very expensive one, but what this allows you to do, it grants the bearer's unit sustain hits 1. And while you're in the Devastated Doctrine, it grants critical hits on a 5+. Now, sustain hits 1 on 5+ is good by itself. However, it also grants that critical hits on a 5+ to models that grant lethal hits, such as Lieutenant and the Biologist. So this is a very good option. While it's a little bit pricey, it is definitely up there in the S tier for one of the best enhancements in the Codex, even though it is 30 points and a little bit on the pricey side. And we step across to the Anvil Siegeforce. First up, we've got Indomitable Fury at 20 points. So again, pushing the price up a little bit there. This one is for a Gravis model only. And the first time the bearer is destroyed, it gets to stand back up, not in engagement range, but as close as possible to where it died. Where it only gets to stand back up on a 2+. So it's not a guarantee, but you do get your full wounds back. So this is quite a solid option again. I'd say 20 points might be slightly on the expensive side, and the fact that it is Gravis only does restrict it slightly as well. I think it's to the lower end of B, possibly top end of C. So we'll probably put it in C now, because there's very few options that will go into B, but we can have a look at the end to see if there's any juggling we're going to do. Next, we've got Stoke Defender. So this grants feel no pain 6+ to the bearer's unit when they're within range of an objective marker. And it also makes Battle Shock only halve your OC rather than going to 0. This is again when you're on an objective. So this is quite a good option. It makes you very durable, especially if you're putting it on, say, a Terminator unit that's already got that 2-up, 4-up to give it a feel no pain 6+, and not be able to be put down on OC 0. Since it halves and rounds up, you'll always remain on that 1 OC for the unit. Unless you do have the Ancient, then it has a little bit more of an effect because you go from 2 to 1 instead. I think at 15 points, this is quite nicely priced, especially if you're going for the durable style of play. I think this is pushing into the A tier. Then we have Fleet Commander at 15 points. This is for Captain models only, and this is essentially an orbital strike. So in one command phase, you choose a point on the battlefield. In the next command phase, you choose another one up to 12 inches away. You draw a straight line, and on a 3+, you do D3 mortal wounds. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. If it was 0 points, you probably still wouldn't take it, because it's never going to be an option to use. Your opponent can just react and get out of the way, Or they can just take the fact that it's on a 3+, it does D3 mortal wounds. It's going to average 1 to 2 wounds for every other or every third unit you select. And it's once a game. It's definitely down in D tier. If we had a trash tier, it would be in that. Then we've got Architect of War. So this is 25 points, very expensive one. And this allows the bearer's unit to ignore cover for ranged weapons. Whilst that is quite a good bit of tech to have, ignoring any benefits of cover, so you're not getting any cover that's potentially giving you -1 or giving them +1 to their save. This is going to ignore that, which is quite nice, but at 20 points is slightly on the expensive side. If it was a bit cheaper, say 10 points to 15 points, then I think you are pushing it down at the bottom of B, but it's quite difficult to find 20 points in an army to dedicate, 25 points in an army to dedicate towards this. If it was slightly on this cheaper side, it would be in B, but just that 25 points is hard to get over, so it is in C tier. Next up, we've got Firestorm Assault Force, which is, of course, the Salamanders detachment. So first up, we've got Adamantine Mantle for 20 points. Now, this gives you -1 damage for the model, and if the weapon's a melter or torrent weapon, the damage moves to 1 damage. So it's quite nice to have on a character at 20 points. It's a little bit on the expensive side, and your model's often going to be protected in a unit anyway, so the -1 damage isn't going to come in all that often, but you are going to have times in the game where, you know, turning a melter, which is D6 +2 usually, into 1 damage is going to be very nice. It is slightly on the expensive side, but if you are going for a durable style of play, especially if you've got a character that's going to be out there by themselves, say for example you're going for like one of the Gravis characters, where you've got a quite a durable character there, you might give it to it. I think you probably are looking at D just based on the price, maybe edging into C. It's still nowhere near Fleet Commander though, which should be really all the way over here. Next we have War Tempted Artifice. This is 25 points, so again a very expensive one. But this is actually not too bad. It grants +3 strength to the bearer's melee weapon. I do think this is quite a good option, especially if you're combining the once a game captain ability to have devastating wounds and +3 attacks. That gives you a lot of opportunity to do a lot of damage. It is slightly on the pricey side though, at 25 points. I think you can often find space for it, so I'll put it into the lower end of B for the moment. Next we have Champions of Humanity. This is 10 points and for Tacticus models only, and this allows the bearer's unit to ignore modifiers to the characteristics. This is excluding saving throws, so anything that's going to reduce weapon skill, damage, your OC value, your ballistic skill, anything such as like that, reducing your movement, this is going to negate it. At 10 points, I think it's quite easy to find a way to put this in, especially if you really want to guarantee that characteristics in certain units that you're going to be using are going to be fully operational the entire time. So I think it's quite easy to add this to your list for 10 points. So we'll put it in there. Again, a solid B option. And possibly just because it's cheaper, just edging ahead. And finally for Salamanders, we have Forged in Battle. So this is 15 points. And while leading a unit, once a turn, you can turn a hit or a saving throw into a 6. So if you want to guarantee you're hitting something, well, once a turn, you can make sure it's a 6 when you roll that one. Which is really nice to have. Or if you're going for a durable option, you've got that option for the save throw. So if you haven't had to use it with a hit throw, having it be a save throw is quite nice as well. 15 points is probably about fair for this. I'd say it's probably B tier to the bottom of C tier, just for the fact that it's not going to come up all too often. And a lot of the time, the units you are going to be using this on, you've got built-in rerolls, or you're going into your Oaths a Moment target, or you're using another mechanism to improve your hit rate, which probably is going to just edge into the C tier. Next, we have Ironstorm Spearhead. Now, this is the Iron Hands detachment. First up, we have Adept of Omnissiah. So this is for a Tech Marine model only and has recently been nerfed. So once per battle round, you can change damage for a vehicle unit within 6 inches to 0. Quite a nice ability until you realize it's 35 points, so it's quite on the pricey side. I think just based on the price alone being 35 points and that it's only once per battle round, you're probably going to move this into the D tier. It's just not cheap enough to really bother taking. Then we've got Target Augury Web. Again, this is Tech Marine only. This is 30 points, so again, another expensive one. This, you select one unit within 6 inches in your command phase, and you can give this unit, this vehicle unit that is, lethal hits. Now, even though it is very expensive and it isn't quite as good as it was previously, because you did have that aura, I think just to be able to give lethal hits to your vehicles is very nice from your Tech Marine, especially when you already give them +1 to hit as well. So I think that's a solid A tier option, really. Then we have Flesh is Weak at 10 points. This gives the bearer Feel No Pain 4+. I think Feel No Pain 4+ for 10 points is very nice. Might not come into play too often unless you want to put it onto one of your Tech Marines, just in case someone gets around the lone operative. I think 10 points, very easy to find a way to get into your list. So a solid B tier option. Finally, for Iron Hands, we have Master of War Machine. This is 20 points. So in your command phase, you can select one vehicle within 6 inches, and that vehicle can fall back or advance and still be able to shoot. So quite a nice option, probably slightly pricey on the 20 points. I think that's going to slide into the C tier. There's just better options to be had in the detachment, and you're not really going to be able to find probably this additional 20 points when you're already spending out elsewhere. Then on to the Lnace Task Force. First, we've got Portents of Wisdom. This is 15 points. This allows the bearer's unit to re-roll advanced rolls. Now, this is a bit of a strange one, really, because a lot of your stratagems are really geared towards mounted units, and your mounted units already get an inbuilt automatic 6-inch. So even though it's a good enhancement and the price isn't too bad, you're not actually going to be able to feed your stratagems into using this. Now, you're going to get more use out of other units that can take this. But just based on the fact that it doesn't really play into the units that the Lnace Task Force has been designed to use around, it's just pretty pointless with them. So even though, bearing that in mind, I'll put it C tier, but it does have some play for some other units that you might want to lean into anyway. Then we have Hunter's Instinct. This is 10 points, so quite cheap. This is for a mounted unit only. And when the bearer's unit is in strategic reserve, it can count the battle round as one higher than it actually is. So this affects how you deploy. So if you don't have deep strike when you're deploying based on the battle round, you might be coming from the edge of the board. Then you can come from the edge of your opponent's deployment zone, and then from the back of your opponent's deployment zone based on what battle round it is. So having those one higher just gives you a little bit more flexibility and space to operate. So at 10 points, especially when you are possibly going to be using mounted from reserve anyway, I think it's quite a nice option to have. If it was a bit more expensive, it definitely would be going into the C tier. Then we have Fainting Withdrawal. This is 20 points, and this allows the bearer's units to be eligible to shoot in a turn that it fell back. So a decent option to have. A lot of the other detachments have this in the way often as just a stratagem, or you do get this with your lieutenant as well. So 20 points is very expensive for what it does. If it was 10 points, I think it'd probably be solid top of the C. Now, it's going to be bumped to the C to D, really. You're not really going to have that many instances where you're going to need to fall back and shoot with this type of detachment. Finally, we have Fury of the Storm. This is 25 points, so again, quite a pricey one. This is for a mounted model only. So the bearer gets +1 strength and AP on the melee weapons, and if it ends a charge move, it's +2 strength and AP. That's quite nice to have. But when you bear in mind there's only a chaplain on a bike that you can use this from, unless you're leaning the legend units, I think to be 25 points and this restrictive is really expensive. Even though it is a good enhancement, I think it's just far too expensive for what it is. So again, I think it's probably going to be a middling C tier one for me. Then we're on to Vanguard Spearhead, which of course is the Raven Hands detachment. First up, we have Ghost Cloak at 15 points. This grants the bearer stealth and lone operatives, which is quite nice to have. You might not use it too often because a lot of time your leaders are going to be actually leading a unit. And you do have the lieutenant with the combi weapon that already has this ability. But its price point is really nice, especially if you've just got the points left over to put it on something. So you could, for example, be within a unit and the unit gets wiped out. And then all of a sudden they want to bring the guns to bear onto your leader. But lo and behold, now they can't if they're outside of 12 inches. And if they're inside 12 inches, -1 to hit. So I think at 15 points, it's quite nicely priced. I'd probably put that at the bottom of B. It's a solid one for its price point. Next, we have Blade Driven Deep. So this is for infantry only. And it's 25 points, which is a little bit on the expensive side. But this grants the bearer's unit the infiltrator's keyword. Now, this is quite nice because this essentially makes the majority of the infantry units in the game, you can set them up in no man's land as long as you're 9 inches from the enemy deployment zone or enemy models. This gives you a fair bit of play. It means that you can be further afield. So at the moment, you're going to be limited to quite squishy units infiltrating, but this allows you to infiltrate Ravish units, Terminate units, units that your toughness 5, your toughness 6 with additional wounds and better saves is going to put them in a position where they can do damage earlier on or hold objectives earlier on and be really durable and sit on it. I think even though it's expensive, I quite like it. I think if it was cheap, it would definitely be a solid mid-tier B1. Probably pushing to C to the end of B. We'll put it in B for now. Then we've got Execute and Redeploy. This is 20 points. And this is for Phobos units only. So in the shooting phase, after the bearer's unit has shot and is not in engagement range, you can move it up to 6 inches. You cannot declare charge when you're doing this, and you cannot use this to allow the unit to move twice in the shooting phase. So there will be no shooting and moving with your eliminators and then using this to move again. I think 20 points is slightly on the expensive side, especially for a Phobos unit. There's not many units that are going to be damage dealing. So it becomes slightly difficult to see where you would use this. I think if it was 10 points, it'd have much more play. But just being 20 points for units that do not cause damage, you might have a little bit of difficulty using this. If you put it on in curses to begin the game, they've got the scout moves at the start, then the normal movement. And then you've then got the ability to move 6 inches again, might be quite nice. But mostly it's going to be difficult to see how you're going to get the most benefit of these 20 points that's been spent. With that bear in mind, I think I'll put it on towards the bottom of C. Then we've got Shadow War Veteran. This is for Phobos units only. And once per battle, after your opponent has used a stratagem, you can increase the cost by 1 CP for the rest of the battle. This is 30 points. It's very expensive. However, if you against an opponent that has one really good strategy, and you can increase the value by 1, negating potentially captains reducing it by 1, that is going to be very nice, especially if you get against someone like orcs that don't really have the ability to reduce the CP cost of their stratagems, to then move a top stratagem from 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. I think that's very nice. Even though it's 30 points, I think this is a really solid enhancement to have. Finally, on to the First Company Task Force. First up, we got the Imperium Sword. It's 25 points, so another expensive one. This grants the bearer's melee weapons +1 attacks, and once per battle, +1 attacks to the bearer's unit for just that one phase as well. It's quite nice, slightly on the expensive side, but if you're putting this on a unit such as Terminate, it's getting that +1 attack on Thunderhammers or Power Fist is very nice. It'd be nice if they could do that every phase for 25 points. I think the fact that you get it once a game, it would be really nice if that was maybe 15 points instead. But I think it's probably, just because it's once a game and it's quite limited, it's probably a C tier enhancement. Next up, we have Iron Resolve. So this is 15 points for Terminators only. The bearer gets a Feel No Pain 5+, and once per battle until the end of the phase, the entire unit gets the Feel No Pain 5+. So I think this is very similar to the last one. It's actually quite good. It's not quite as limited because it's only 15 points, but it is Terminators only. I think I would put this in B based on the fact that the Feel No Pain 5+ once a game for 15 points is quite nice to have. It's not too difficult to find that in your army in comparison to the 25 points for Imperium Sword. Next, we have Right to War. This is 10 points, and this is for Terminators only. This improves the OC of the bearer by one, and once per battle, as we've seen previously. For the rest of the phase, it increases it for the unit as well. I think at 10 points, it's quite good. I can see why you would use this, but, and it's a big but, it only wants the game to improve your OC by 1. 10 points is cheap. Again, if it was for the entire game, you had +1 OC. Now, there's times when this is going to be really useful for you, where it allows you to flip objectives late game, especially if your second allows you to score at the end of your turn your primary objectives. And that might push it up to a B, where it's situational. Maybe even an A, where it's flipping things really well for you. But I think on average, it's going to be low C, high B. And finally, we've got Fear Made Manifest. 30 points, another very expensive one. While an enemy unit, excluding monsters or vehicles, is within 6 inches of the bearer, each time it fails a battle shock test, one model in the unit is destroyed. And once per battle, you can change this to D3 models, and you get to choose the models that are destroyed. So whilst it's an interesting enhancement, at 30 points, it's very expensive. Very expensive. And the fact that it's based on battle shock tests, and it's really difficult to fail battle shock tests, and there's not many ways that Space Marines can reduce your ability to pass battle shock tests. I mean, based on that and the 30 points, I think it's probably pushing it down to D tier. As you see with all the first company task force ones, there's too many restrictions in play, and they're too expensive. I mean, we probably could knock Iron Resolve down to C as well. It's not going to really have that much of an impact. Once a game, you're going to get 1+ attack for your models, which isn't really phenomenal, especially for 25 points. While we're just having a little look around to see if things are where they should be. Sometimes when we're just adding stuff to these tier lists, we add them and not really think about their placement. So I think we're definitely moving Target Augury Web ahead of Stoic Defender. It's something that's just going to come off every turn for you and really going to increase your damage output for the army. I think you could probably argue that Shadow War Veteran would be ahead of it as well. It's safe to say that Fleet Commander is definitely at the bottom. Nothing is going to knock that out of position. I think I would move Adamantine Mantle up a little bit. I think it's just got a little bit more durability and less restrictions in place than Adept of Omnissiah. And the fact that Fainting Withdrawal just isn't going to come into play that often, especially when you've got the likes of Lieutenants that you can use to do that anyway. Big portent of Wisdom, the fact that you get to advance and charge, is going to pop it up a little bit further. Of course, you can't use this on your Outriders, but you do have other melee units that you can use to get that advance and charge off. So I think at 15 points, it probably is slightly more solid than the place we put it in at the moment. I think probably Master of Machine, the ability to fall back and shoot as well, which is quite nice for a vehicle. That's negating the -1 then for shooting into combat. That's quite powerful to have because there's not really another way to fall back with vehicles and still have that ability. I think I probably would move up Blade Driven Deep as well. I think this is probably a solid B tier one. It's got a lot of interesting play in the future, especially if there's a couple of ability changes or some units go down in points. It'd be really interesting to have this ability, especially if you're considering something like pulling in Azrael, using him with Hell Blasters, and then having a lieutenant for those lethal hits, and give them the ability to infiltrate, could be very nice to have. You're gonna, especially going first in turn 1, you're gonna be able to get off those high-powered plasma shots really early in the game and do a lot of damage. So I think that's where we stand at the moment. I think these are all relatively fairly placed. There's some that are much worse than others, and some that are really standouts, and the points values aren't always equal across the board either, which can be a bit frustrating. Even though we look at the likes of the First Company, they have okay enhancements. Their stratagems and detachment rule really lets them down. It's such a restrictive detachment that even if you made these cheaper, took away the restrictions, maybe give them a little buff, it still wouldn't help the detachment. The detachment needs an entire rewrite. When you consider the things down in the D tier with them, they all have top options. Like you got Salamanders, we've got 2 in B tier and a mid tier C one. Even your White Scars, they've got a couple up in the C tier and then 1 in the B tier, which is quite nice. Plus they've got that Advance and Charge detachment rule, which is really nice. Your Iron Hands, they've got a really good detachment rule, and they've got an A tier and a B tier one there, which is really nice balance for them to have. And Fleet Commander, just GW needs to stop writing these detachments, these stratagems, these updates. They're terrible. They never work. They haven't worked in any of the editions they've used them. They need to stop and just completely rebrand them and change what they are. But saying that, you do have Stoic Defender, which is quite good, and Architect of War and Indomitable Fury are good. They're just expensive at the same time. So let me know below if you agree with this, if there's anything you disagree with, if there's ways that you use enhancement to get the best out of them. Put it down in the comments below. Take it easy. I'll see you next time.